Now when you're ready to write the commentary, I'm just going to go through the process of planning and writing a quick introduction. Because if I can see your planning your introduction, I've seen probably 70% of what I need to see to know whether you're going to be successful or not. This is why we focused upon this in class the other day. So you still have your tick list of terms so that you can use that in your planning because you're going to be using all of these things. First question always is, what was the big idea? I'd say the big idea in this situation, after looking at all of my notes, actually for those of you who don't know the big idea, let's take a moment to write down what we saw. So setting, France or Spanish coast of some consequence, but not that important. We'll mention it, but it's not going to be one of my major body paragraphs for sure. The theme is coming of age. This is very important, possible. And themes work really well for thesis statements. Carrying on. Conflict. Good time to wrestle with this before you start writing. Most people don't. The conflict is probably person versus self, as I view it. If you look down, I'm keeping things down there so I can get to them quickly. Jerry versus his own need for external acceptance is one way of looking at this. We could look at person versus self, person versus nature if you wanted to, Jerry versus the tunnel. But the tunnel is just symbolic of something that he needs to prove to himself. It's not like he's been thrown into nature and he's trying to save himself from being eaten by things that weren't within his control. He chose to put himself there. Why? Because he needs to prove something to himself. So it's not that. Person versus person, he's not against his mother. No, in fact, he returns to his mother at the end. And then we get into other things. It's definitely not person versus society in any way. So here we go. Or person versus supernatural. So person versus self. And this is going to help us by knowing the conflict. We know what the author is trying to accomplish. Diction has already been mentioned in a few ways, and I'm going to talk about that. Choice of diction helps to characterize. And I would say also dialogue helps to show the relationship between Jerry and his mother. The denouement shows what Jerry learned from the tunnel. And we're definitely going to have the symbol of the tunnel. Can't miss that. That's the name of this. If you watched the previous video, you know that we look at the title oftentimes to find some of the most important things that the author could mention to us. Finally, symbolism is used to show Jerry's dive into the depths from sun to darkness and back to sun throughout the story. Much like he does in the actual dive, we also get to see Jerry doing this throughout the story as he makes his decisions. Point of view comes back to that idea, and if we can start to make subheadings, we're going to have body paragraphs here. So let's look at the characterization as one of our major areas to focus upon. So we've got diction that shows that, we've got dialogue that shows that, and point of view was third person omniscient. So with all of those, that goes towards characterization. We could make the conflict come together with the theme, bigger message of the author. So the theme of coming of age and the conflict of person versus self. and then we just need a third part of this, and the third part would definitely be looking at the symbol and what happens after. Here we go. That's not symbolism. Apologies. This imagery. There we go. So when we get to the final idea of Jerry growing up through this experience, we can now start to put these things into chronological order. The chronological order I'm using because going through a tunnel is very chronological. You start at the beginning, you come out the other end. So I'm going to get rid of setting. It's no longer that important. I've got the bigger message of the author. These need to become more defined, but I would start off with my first paragraph is going to be about the characterization and showing the relationship between Jerry and his mother. My second paragraph is going to be about the bigger message of this author, and actually probably this is going to be about the use of the conflict in this story with coming of age, and finally the larger lesson of Jerry's experience. I will probably, when writing these, work on the titles of my paragraphs, but the big idea is now very clear. This is a short story written by Doris Lessing, which shows a young English boy, Jerry, moving through a metaphorical or symbolic tunnel, moving from childhood and possibly into adulthood. Something along those lines. So once I've got all this done, you can tell almost everything. I would take this and I'm going to put it into my introduction. My introduction is going to take this sentence and put it right at the end. Who knows if I make it a little bit better. Notice I can go now if I wanted to. And I didn't use mood, but I used characterization for sure. I used protagonist and talking about Jerry, can't miss that. Conflict, yes. Climax is going to be mentioned, even though I didn't put it in my notes. Climax and denouement can't help but be noticed at the end. Imagery, symbolism, theme, point of view. I've used a lot of literary features in my overall analysis of this, and diction. Author will come into there too, of course. That's not much of a literary feature, but it's something to mention to just recognize that an author is doing all of this for a purpose. All right, so when I start to write my introduction, then the final step, there's an often used symbol or shape that you can use to kind of identify a good introduction. Usually that is there we go. We can revert that. You want to have an inverted triangle. I say inverted. There you go. Rotate this. There you go, and rotate one more time. Okay, you want to start very general, and you want to move to that thesis statement we just put together. So the thesis statement is going to be down here. This statement right here, and we're going to give a little bit of a background to what this is. Something starting possibly with the general idea of coming of age stories have been written by a variety of authors, a variety of cultures, helping to show young readers the types of rites of passage that people their age often face. Start very general. We're just talking about coming of age stories, put this into context, and identifying our audience. And finally, we have one more lead-in sentence until we get to our thesis statement, possibly stating something along the lines of something about this story. So we talked about all coming of age stories, then this story. I might move Doris Lessing's name up now. Doris Lessing focuses on a child's need for approval from adults and older children in her story through the tunnel. There we go. We put this in some context, and we finish with story shows a young English boy, Jerry, who through a metaphorical tunnel moving from childhood possibly into adulthood. The story. The author creates an effective tale through her use of characterization. These are just our body paragraphs from above. Characterization, conflict, and symbolism. There we go. I've got my 3 body paragraphs. I'm ready to go. You'll notice that I did kind of change things when I got there, but that's why you start to organize, so things can take their natural toll. Here's my thesis statement, and you'll notice right here that if you look at my example here, characterization is the first paragraph, conflict is the second, and symbolism is the third. So I know that I'm going to talk about specifically authorial choices. Thank you for listening.